So, welcome to the latest edition of DiBella's Digest with Lou DiBella, of course. And the first thing I wanted to ask you about was some positive, I don't know if we call it news, but positive speculation. I saw your tweet earlier directed towards Eddie Hearn and Matchroom about staging something we've talked about before, an all-female supercard, if you like, ladies' night. I believe you tagged it. Just tell us a bit about that.
Well, someone suggested, Eddie and I have the two biggest groups of female fighters of any promoters in the world at the moment. And a lot of our fighters are in the same weight classes and match up. So someone suggested, it was a manager actually, it was Brian Cohen, who is one of the bigger managers in women's boxing, who suggested a fight off between a number of my fighters and a number of Matchroom fighters. And look, we're going to have to get creative when we get back going again. And, it might be something that makes sense. And look, the women are going to need help just like the men are going to need help in getting back, to business. And that's more than just one, Taylor Serrano fight, though we all want to see Serrano Taylor. I know like Serrano Taylor is actually a women's fight that has the whole industry excited, and we want to get that fight going. But when we get boxing going again, we can't ignore the ladies. They need their opportunity and their platform. And it's more important than ever that we do that all women's show. And that's something that I'm aiming toward, and I'd be happy to do it with Eddie.
And would that be in the US? And what would some of the other fights be?
Who knows? I'm not getting that far into specifics, Danny. Like I could sit here and I can, look, he has a very deep stable. He has a girl at 130 who's a world champion. I mean, you know names probably better than I do. Right, Terry Harper, and for example, Terry Harper would match up in a really great fight with Heather Hardy, who's one of the biggest stars in female boxing in the U.S. And Heather Hardy's like a Gaddy Ward of women's boxing. She's like a real blood and guts kind of warrior. And I think that would be a great match with her and Terry Harper. I think, there's a lot of my fighters factor in with a lot of his in terms of similar divisions. I have Christine Leonardo, who gave Katie a real good fight. And I'd love to see Christina fight Jessica McCaskill, for example.
Yep.
Now I know there was talk about Jessica fighting Cecilia, but I have a bunch of fighters that figure into Cecilia too. I'd like to see Callie Reese, who I thought, I'm not biased. I wasn't biased when I watched the fight. And when I watched Callie Reese fight, either fought her to a draw or could have been given the decision. It made me sign Callie later after that fight. But I'd love to see a rematch of that. There's a lot of fights that could be made between my fighters and Eddie's among the ladies.
You're not the only promoter.
So what's going on?
Sorry, go ahead.
So what's going on? What's going on your side of the pond right now? You hearing any talk about when boxing's coming back or anything?
Yeah, well, the Boxing Board of Control last week issued a statement saying, subject to further review, they're willing to allow boxing to take place from the start of July behind closed doors, obviously in the first instance, maximum of 5 fights per card, social distancing to be enforced among personnel, and testing of everyone involved before and after, which is pretty much as you predicted.
I think that's where we're heading. I think we're heading toward testing the waters in July. And look, I think there is an effort on the part of everybody in our industry right now to do what's responsible. And we do have to get back to work. Everyone has to get back to work at some point, but I think the midsummer sounds about right, and it makes sense that the British Board of Boxing Control. I know the WBC came up with some parameters and thoughts that they laid out about how to administer bouts, under WBC bouts during the pandemic, and some of the stuff's a little bit controversial, like remote judging, which I think is a bit of a problem. The problem with remote judging is, how are you going to work that out with the television feed? Or is each judge going to see the same view they would have seen? I don't think that's going to be cost effective. Like, I don't think you want 3 judges looking at the same television angle. And if you're a real boxing person And Danny, I think you know this. There are many fights that look very different when you're sitting there in the crowd watching them as opposed to watching it on television.
Very much so.
And there's certain things that translate better than others, through the TV screen. And I'm a little bit concerned about that concept. But look, I applaud Mauricio Suleiman for starting to think about this and throw out ideas. We have to be creative. We have to be less rigid than we usually are. But I also think we got to be careful not to do something that may hurt the sport in the long run. It's going to be interesting times. It's going to be interesting to see things come back. I'm going to be ordering the UFC pay-per-view this weekend. I will admit it. I will definitely order it. It is at least a form of combat sports, and there's some good fights on there. So I'm looking forward to that. Not to mention the fact it gives me something to gamble on.
Excellent. Something that did surprise me earlier this week was Eddie Hearn's confirmation that Dillian Whyte, Alexander Povetkin, which is a pay-per-view show here in the UK, will take place behind closed doors, hopefully at the end of July. I'm not surprised that fights in general are taking place with no crowd, but for a fight of that magnitude, certainly over here, to do so, and giving up that kind of gate money as a result, I was quite surprised by that.
On one hand, it's surprising, but I got to tell you, it falls into that range of fight that it may work well for him. And in the sense, look, it's a fight that would have drawn a huge crowd, but it's going to be one of the first big events back for UK boxing. In fact, I will predict it will be the first big event back for UK boxing. There may be another show done behind closed doors, but no one's going to have a fight of that magnitude before that fight goes on later this summer. I believe that will cause a very, very, very high buy rate among British fight fans, as my guess. They haven't been spending a lot of money. They haven't been going out. Granted, we're all going to be facing economic issues going forward, but I think the first pay-per-view back of major consequence, I can see doing very well. So I understand that decision. It didn't surprise me so much. I would be surprised though, and it wouldn't make much sense to me if that was on the same. Well, look, maybe you would. I mean, you could have an amazingly big show, but would you want to put two fights that could sell out rooms on the same card in an empty room? Because it would seem to me that I don't know for certain that he would make a decision to put Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano on the same show.
He said he wants it to be on the same show, and he's going to try hard to make it happen. Hasn't committed to it.
Yeah, I think that's one he's going to have to take a good look at. I probably would think about saving that for its own situation, or you're also going to have issues in terms of travel and some other stuff that would affect that, and the need to quarantine. I mean, it gets expensive. I mean, if they're going to require 14-day quarantine for a fighter that's flying in, that's costly, and that it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, it's going to take a while. We're going to make these decisions that we slowly need to come back. We'll set time frames, July, August, but then we're going to get into the details and the difficult issues, the testing, the quarantining, how the judges work. How do you get? I mean, there's a referee who gets paid very little, and the majority of them, frankly, are middle-aged guys or older. Does a referee want to get into that situation? I would imagine if everyone's being tested, maybe. But I mean, we're going to have hurdles. But you know what? We always survive. We find a way. We'll jump over some hurdles, and I believe we will get going again. But it's not going to be without a little bit of pain and a little bit of attention to detail.
Now, while no one really expects Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury to happen anytime soon, regardless of the speculation.
I got it. I want to cut you off here, Dan, because that's one thing I just don't want. I don't want to talk about it. It's like, why would you rush the biggest fight in the world into a timetable that's so uncertain? And then if you're a Deontay Wilder, why are you going to step aside unless the money was extraordinary? And why would the money be more extraordinary while being negotiated in the middle of a pandemic than it would be later? So it's a story, and I do believe, by the way, that when the fight happens, it probably will be in Saudi Arabia or UAE or somewhere in the Middle East. I also think that the Middle East will probably come back with big fights with some type of audience before we come back with big fights with an audience in London or New York, you know? But I sort of think that's a non-story. There are too many. And you saw Eddie doing a lot of backtracking because I think legally he had to. I mean, sitting there and announcing that you're negotiating, unless you had, look, if they had the okay, if they went to Deontay Wilder and said, are you okay with me trying to negotiate this? Trying to negotiate the fight and circumvent your rights, then maybe you could do it. But otherwise, I'm guessing they got a phone call from Wilder's people that said, wait a minute, we already exercised our option and you have a deal. But I think it's sort of a non-story. You're not going to see, I'll make one really good bet. You're not going to see Fury and Joshua this year. I will take anyone's action on that. I'll make you another pretty good bet. You're not going to see Wilder and Fury this year.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. What I really wanted to get your opinion on, it was a segue which I perhaps shouldn't have bothered with because you cut me off too early in my prime. But I wanted to know what you felt about the growing influence of the Middle East as a region on boxing.
I don't know that it'll last forever. I think the Middle East has reasons. They want to show people that they can host big events, and they want to encourage people to consider the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, UAE as destinations for travel and such. And they're also, to some extent, there is an effort to clean up politics and to show that, we're 21st century, destinations. So it doesn't surprise me. Look, they're certainly sitting on a lot of money, but, there's a lot of issues with oil prices right now. And I don't know. I think what's going on in the world is going to affect the economy of the world in a lot of ways. It remains to be seen how much of a force the Middle East will be in the future. But I absolutely do believe that you will see some huge events in the Middle East. And I think in the short run, what's going on in the world. You there, Danny?
Yeah, go for it.
Did you hear my answer or no?
I heard in the short run with what's going on in the world. That was the last thing I heard.
Oh, okay. It was some people trying to dial my phone. I think in the short run, what's going on in the world could push some bigger events to the Middle East.
Do you think that kind of?
But I don't know how much of a force Saudi Arabia or Dubai or anybody else will be in boxing in the long term. I don't know.
Do you think that takes away from some domestic fights, like two guys from the US going out there, two guys from the UK, or does it enhance it in the way Ali Foreman in Zaire did?
Well, look, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to believe that the proper venue for the two of the greatest heavyweights in the history of the UK would be the UK.
Oh yeah.
So I would rather see the fight in the UK, and I'd certainly, if I was traveling to a fight, rather travel to a stadium in the UK than travel to Saudi Arabia to see that fight. I mean, it'd be a shame if that fight took place in Saudi Arabia, in my view. But money talks, and economics are very, very important and always very important. Money always talks. But money's going to talk even louder when we're coming out of a pandemic into a worldwide recession. Money's going to speak very loudly. So I think it's going to be a matter of the dollars and cents.
Brilliant. Well, I think that kind of covers the major talking points for this week. But how's things with you generally? And are you still coping mentally, emotionally with the lockdown and restrictions?
Yeah, but I'm eating too well. I already needed to lose a few pounds, and suffice it to say, it's been really difficult to try to do that during this pandemic, because one of the few things I look forward to, other than walking my dog, is eating. So, I got to do a little bit better on that. I got to get on. I managed to sprain my foot during a pandemic. Don't ask me how. I stepped the wrong way. I was half asleep and I stepped the wrong way. I decided in the middle of the night to go get something to drink, and I stepped the wrong way coming off the last step. So I've been limping around for a while, but it feels much better now. So I got to get back on the stationary bike and try to like shed some of this excess weight. Look, I mean, these are not easy times. They're not. I still have friends in the hospital. I have relatives and people I know that are going through some really bad things. You got to be grateful for the blessings you do have. And I don't want to sound preachy, but it's just the truth. There are an awful lot of people that have it worse than we do. And I'm fine. Thank you for asking, Danny. And I hope you're doing well too, my friend. And I've been enjoying these little Wednesdays at 7 p.m. your time, 2 p.m. my time, to chat. So it's been a nice ritual we've established during this pandemic. Maybe we have to continue it.
Well, I just hope you keep it going when the pandemic's finished and don't drop me like a bad habit.
I'll try to avoid doing that, my friend. But good talking to you. Thank you.
And you. Take care. Speak soon.